Greetings, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. And joining me today is Larry Hagner of the Dad Edge. Really excited to see you. Welcome, sir.
Hey, what's going on, Jason? It's good to be here, brother. I'm excited to have this conversation, man.
I am really very excited my own self. Now, for on the off chance that there's anybody who has heard of my podcast and hasn't heard of yours, could you tell us a little bit about your show and what you do and how you're trying to what you're trying to accomplish there?
Absolutely. So, if you're interested in learning more about not being such a knucklehead father, and if you're imperfect and you make mistakes and maybe you're even kind of self-critical of yourself and all those different things, well, the podcast is probably something you might want to check out. So,
Well, one
do
of
the
the things I
show as a
really
knucklehead.
appreciate, yeah, one of the things I appreciate about your show is that compassionate vibe that you just described there. I mean, you've got the shield and the Spartan helmet, and you've got guys like Jocko coming on, and but it doesn't have that macho vibe to it at all. It's really you're very emotionally honest. You're very kind and compassionate. You have an approach to mistakes and forgiving yourselves about mistakes that I think a lot of fathers didn't really get when they were learning to be a father. Folks our age watching our dads be dads, watching our grandpas be dads. That wasn't part of the how to be a good father messaging until very recently.
I would agree. I mean, I think the dads in our, who raised us, they did the best they could with what they
Yeah.
had. I mean, I think that was the thing back then. It's like they provide, they raise men and they do it in a really sort of rough kind of way, right? Which don't get me wrong. I mean, you get that feel from my show, like as far as like the mixture of it's a masculine show, but it's also, we also have high emotional IQ. So and everything in between. So I think that more men are really, really curious about that approach. Like, hey, how can I have this, incredible mixture of and I can be tough when I need to, but I can also be really empathetic and compassionate when I need to. I can hold kids want to talk to me, versus like they have to talk to me or I try to coax them into talking to me. All these things that we're talking about. And, marriage is a big focus for the show too, like helping men with marriage. We're thrown to the wolves on that one and parenting too. It's like, hey, don't worry, you'll figure it out. Best time of your whole life. And I'll tell you, like, marriage is a skill just like anything else. And just like anything else, whatever we're good at, I know you have a background in martial arts. You had to study, learn martial arts. You had to spar. You had to, test yourself. You had to advance all these different things. You don't just wake up one day and like, hey, I'm a black belt today. No, you're not. You got to go learn and earn that, right? And this is no different. Fatherhood, marriage, leadership, it's all the same stuff.
And it's kind of that interesting thing where any of our other projects, stuff at work, hobbies, building an addition to the garage, whatever it is, we're not going to make that up as we go along. But there's this cultural narrative that with our marriage and with our kids, arguably the most important things we will ever do it or ever be involved in, we're kind of expected to just kind of wing it. And this narrative that no, we can give that same amount of thought and study and preparation, that same resilience and willingness to change direction if something's not serving us. That narrative is kind of new, and I think it's really important.
I think it is new, and I think it's something that the faster we can embrace that, I think the better the world will get, to be honest.
No, I absolutely agree. Now, the first question I had written down to ask you was define good father, but I think you just did that. So let's kind of move on to the next. In terms of your own definition of being a good father, over the years you've done your podcast, how has that changed?
I would say, being a good father, like I didn't know
Mm,
what a good father was. I'll tell you, it's not a destination. It's a journey. It's a pursuit. I have a book that's coming out in 25 called The Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood. And I went through a publisher on that one. And the publisher, I'll never forget, we had this conversation. He's like, and he's not a dad, the owner of the publication company. And he's like, why the pursuit of legendary fatherhood? Why not just call it legendary fatherhood? I was like, because there really is no such thing. Like no one actually and gets to the top of the mountain and says, I did it. I'm an awesome father. I've reached the top of the mountain. right? There's the pursuit of excellence for it. It's just like, I know you have, again, you have a background in martial arts, right? It's like, we can deem ourselves the best in the world, or we could go on a pursuit of, I'm going to be the best I can be in this realm, right? And that's what it's all about, really. I think if you want to be a better father, it starts with you being a better man, period. Like you can talk the talk or you can walk the walk. And I think it's what's really, really important is that you don't just talk. The audio has to match the video when it comes to us being a good father. I think a good father is someone who is physically present, emotionally available, someone who's a good leader, someone who can provide life lessons, someone who's humble, someone who can actually apologize when he makes mistakes, because I think that's really important too. Where else are the kids going to learn how to be a humble man, right? Important to show your kids to be a student, right? To suck at something. I literally just took on the role of being the assistant hockey coach
Mm.
for my kids' 8U team because the head coach needs some help. And I announced to my family, I'm like, hey guys, I'm the new assistant hockey coach for Colton's team. And they're like, Dad, you can barely eat. I'm like, you're right. But I am willing to learn because I want to be out there with him
Yeah.
playing. It'll be my first year coaching. Why not do something new together? Like, what better way to show my son it's okay to suck at something and be new at something than to do it right there with him? Right. So I think
Yeah.
that there's a lot. I think there's more to it than that, obviously, but I think those are some high level things.
Those are really important. I especially like your point about being willing to suck in front of your kids because,
Yeah.
especially when they're about toddler age and start to be people up until they're teenagers, we're supposed to be dad. We're supposed to be 10 foot tall and bulletproof. We're supposed to be unerring. And that ability to apologize and that willingness to just look dumb, I think it's counterintuitive and hard for some dads.
I would agree. And it's really okay to
Yeah.
to look dumb in front of your
Yeah.
kids because like how are we going to encourage and inspire them to go out and try new things if we're not willing to go out and try new things?
And how are we going to, if we're not willing to make mistakes in front of them, how are they going to believe us when we say,
Yeah.
hey, you made a mistake and that's all right. Let's work together to
Yeah.
figure out how to recover from it. They're not going to believe
Yeah.
that if we're never willing to admit mistakes or make mistakes in front of them.
I agree. I agree. I just started jujitsu as well. And my kids they saw like the skin on my knees, and they're like, Dad, where'd the sores on your knees come from? I was like, I was from jujitsu class. And they're like, they're jujitsu at 49 years old. And I just respond to them. I'm like, you're never too old. You're never too
Yeah,
old to learn something new. I've always wanted to do this and I'm fine to do it. So why not do it?
absolutely. And you came home with some mat kisses, and that's the first step.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, how old was Anthony Bourdain when he started BJJ? I think he was in his 60s.
Oh, wow. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. And he had a great interview where he kind of made that same point about one of the things he liked about it is most of an adult's life after you get out of high school, after you get out of college, after you get out of formal education, it's mostly getting better at things you're already excellent at. And it's a rare experience as an adult to go do something that you're brand new at and totally suck at. And that he was enjoying and appreciating that experience, which, if I memory serves, he got into because his wife and her child were both Brazilian Jiu Jitsu competitors, and he wanted to be with them.
Now that's pretty cool.
Yeah, this is a safety podcast, not just a parenting podcast. And I think this is approaching into one of the most important things I think about safety, where, we can talk about whether or not to have a gun in the house. We can talk about taking a martial arts class. We can talk about putting an emergency kit in the back of the car, about making sure your fire extinguishers are loaded, all of those things. But then there's those other pieces of safety about having your kids be resistant to grooming, having your kids being willing to come talk to you if they get a text that they're not comfortable about, having them come to you and ask about questions or admit that they are in some kind of trouble legally or at school. And it's those lines of communication that keep our kids safer than anything else that we can do. You know, all that other training, all the kind of exciting stuff, take your first aid class, just stop the bleed training, all of that stuff. It's good, it's useful, but it's not as important as just raising kids who are willing to come to you and say, help. And in your experience on this interview, what are some of the pieces there? Some of the, especially what are some of the myths maybe that you've helped to bust or misconceptions that were brought to your attention?
So I think this is a great question because how do I create an environment where my kids feel very free and welcoming to talk to me about anything, right? The good, the bad, especially the bad, right? Or if they need help, like that they don't feel shame or anything like, coming to me with help. I am really, really keen on creating environments of psychological safety. And I mean, psychological safety is more of an academic term, but let's just put it in real world. Real world, when you create an environment of psychological safety, it goes like this. Jason, I don't know what it is about you, but I feel like I can tell you anything. That's that's an environment of psychological safety that you have provided for somebody, right? Or you've said that to somebody else and you don't really know why. You're just like, man, this person's incredibly nice and easy to talk to. I feel like or you're sending them the text message after you've had the conversation, like, oh my God, I just kept going and going. I felt very comfortable with you. And I apologize if I gave you way too much information, right? That's an environment of psychological safety where people feel the absence of shame so they can talk about anything. And we have those people, if you think about it, we have those people identified in our lives. So, for you and your audience, like think about those people that it's 3 a.m., something horrible happened. I know I can go to this person. And their response will be, I'll be right there. Or, like it doesn't have to be 3 a.m. It could be like anything that we want to talk about. It's like, I know this person will listen to me. I know this person will understand. So with my kids, I have four boys, 18, 16, 10, and 8. My goal, and this actually just happened with my oldest about a month ago, is to be my kid's 3 a.m. call. Now, here's what I'll tell you. Like, you can actually start manufacturing environments of psychological safety. Kids are not only telling you everything that's going on in their life, but they want to tell you everything that's going on in their life. And it was 1:47 in the morning. I know that because I saw the phone ring and I saw the time. Dad, I need help. And it was nothing horrible. Like it was nothing like, nah, it was like he needed a ride. Be right there.
Yeah.
And he knows that that's not going to, it's like, what the hell? You woke me up. What the hell are you doing? Why do you need me in the middle of the night? No, no, no. So how do you do this over time? I love to ask these questions every day. First question is, what's been the best part of your day? Or what's been a highlight of your day? Or what's been something that you're proud of today? I want them to basically extract a story of something that they're proud of that they can tell me that they're excited to tell me. I stay away from how was your day because it's going to get you a one word answer and it doesn't provide any connection whatsoever. But when you ask somebody what's a high point moment of your day, and then they get to tell you. And then you get to match their energy, like, oh my gosh, it's so exciting. You must feel so proud, right? Or whatever it is. The second question, I'll go to the third question. What are you most excited about tomorrow? I asked that question because that's a launching pad for like, hey, I know track tryouts for today. You told me about it yesterday. How'd they go? Right? Because interested dads are interesting to kids, period. But the second question is psychological safety. And this is what I'll tell you. And this, not me and not guys that we coach or teach. They love these conversations because of what they do. So I'll ask my kids, what'd you fail at today? What was a horrible moment for you today? What was something you're not proud of today? What's a challenge you had today? How'd you fall down and get back up today? Right? Things like that. Because Mike, I want a daily conversation around vulnerability, authenticity, failure, face plants, the whole nine yards.
Mm.
To those stories, my kids will make micro decisions every day. Are you still the guy that I can go to and talk to about this stuff?
Yeah.
Or are you going to blast me? Right.
Yeah.
So like, and this is what I follow. So my kid will be like, and dad, I got a D on that science. Right now, I can respond to that a couple different ways. I can blast him and be like, what do you mean you got a D? We don't get D's. Dude, when are you going to get your shit together?
Yeah.
While that might be true, that's not effective, right? It's not effective. In fact, all I did was my kid just registered in his mind, okay, you're not the guy that I tell this stuff to. All
Yeah.
right. From now on, like I hide information. So instead, I praise their courage and I'm like, ooh, man, I bet that took some courage to tell me, dude, when I was your age, I would have never. What happened? You got a D on the science test. What do you think went wrong? And then they'll start to think about it and they're like, you know, to be honest, I didn't study that hard. Like, well, you know what? That's really great awareness. So if you had to do this whole thing all over again, what would you do different? How would you study different? And then they'll be like, I would have studied every single chapter. I would have studied probably 3 nights leading up to the test. I might have even gotten up early. I'm like, dude, that's, yeah, great, great lessons to be learned. So when is your next test? And they'll be like, I actually have one on Friday. I'm like, well, okay, well, it's Monday. Well, so based on the information and what you've learned, like, what are you gonna do different? And they'll just tell me, and they'll do it, and then we'll celebrate they overcame, they learned, they did it, and they got a better grade. And suddenly, like, and my kids will actually be like, Dad, thank you so much for talking to me.
Yeah.
All I did was ask you a few questions. That was it, just to get you thinking differently, right? But that there's no pain, there's no blame. The
Yeah.
consequences are their consequences. You got a D on the test. Well, if you fail that class, you got to go to summer school and then you can't go to summer vacation with us. I don't have to ground you. That sucks in enough. Like that's the ownership. But you do that day after day, day after day, day after day.
One of the things I think our experience growing up, I'm making assumptions about you, but we're about the same age, so I'm pretty confident in it. We got in a D at school, or we got in a scuffle and got in trouble, or what have you. We were having a terrible day, and we just knew the second we got home and informed our parents about it, our day was going to get worse. There's going to be an issue. We were definitely going to get grounded. We were definitely going to get yelled at, and just that idea that what you're talking about, you're not making their bad day worse. There's going to be consequences to their bad decisions, to their mistakes, and we're not going to try to mitigate those. But we don't need to artificially inflate those. Instead, we can stand next to them and help them deal with those consequences with grace and humility and maturity. And your three questions is a really good framework for that. When
Well,
I grew
thank
up,
you.
the every dinner table conversation started with going around saying, "What's the best day? What's the best thing that happened today? What's the worst thing that happened today?" And my wife, it turned out her family had the same thing, but they called that tradition roses and thorns. What was the rose in your day, and what was the thorn in your day? Which, as a an '80s headbanger who listened to Poison occasionally, got my attention.
Oh yeah.
But
Every
yeah,
rose has its thorn.
oh yeah. But that idea that being the safe being the safe place, being the resource for solving problems instead of the person who's going to complicate an already difficult situation and make the entire experience worse. I think that's a huge piece of this. Just the that piece of not being the heavy, not being that stereotypical father that you just wait till he gets home
Oh,
with
I hate
bad
that.
news. But the
Yeah.
person who's gonna, another resource, an ally. And folks, I got to tell you that this has been, if you've been watching my show, but there's expert after expert, study after study is confirmed that if your kid can come to you in second grade about how they got yelled at for pulling Sally's pigtails in class, and in fourth grade, they can tell you about getting a bad grade on their spelling test. When they're 16, they're going to come talk to you, ask you about the significant other who wants revealing text. And when they're 18, they're going to come to you about this legal trouble they might have gotten into or about how they almost got a speeding ticket. And when they're adults, they will come to you if they're in a relationship and their partner hit them. All of that stuff starts with when they're really young, making sure that they know that you're the resource. You're not going to shame them. You're not going to compound it with artificial additional punishments because you think that's kind of how we were shown it's supposed to be.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just dying to know, what is your shirt all about?
Oh, it says I'm a little dorky.
Dorky. I was
Dorky. It's a
like,
it's a dad joke.
okay, okay. It's a dad joke. I was
Yeah.
like, maybe he's a locksmith
No.
company. I'm not really sure. I'm a little dorky. Like I'm like, but I got it now. I
Yeah.
got it. I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah.
a little slow,
No.
but I got it. Got it.
No, I'm not permitted to dress myself. My entire wardrobe consists of blue jeans and nerd t-shirts and dad joke t-shirts. Which
Okay.
are, that's my Father's Day routine.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. My youngest son's pun game has gone from "that's my boy" to "dear God, what have I wrought." It's terrifying. Awesome. But
That's
yeah,
good.
I love that vibe. I love that idea. And also that taking the time to sit with your kid and look them in the eye in the middle of your busy day when you got stuff to do, in the middle of their busy day when they got stuff to do. Just like you said, I love that phrase you used earlier about the video matching the audio. You can tell them you love them, but if you take 5 minutes and look them in the eye and not be playing with your phone at the same time and ask those questions and give meaningful responses to their answers, that's walking the talk. That's showing them the love and the respect and the attention that is what they need the most.
I would 100% agree with that.
All right, so that was heavy and that was great. Next question I think is myths and misconceptions of parenting. You've been doing this a long time. You've been talking with people, some of whom you agreed with, some of whom you didn't. You've encountered those. Like the safety myth of stranger danger is one of my big pet peeves. But there's all kinds of other ones. The idea that we just talked about how the role of the father is to be the one that you just wait till he gets home, that heavy-handed discipline source. What are some other big myths you have encountered about parenting that you'd love for the world to stop believing?
I would love for the world to stop believing that you need to just figure out parenting by
Mm,
baptism by fire. Like this one gets me pretty fired up. And I guess it's because like I was under that misconception for
mm,
so long, right?
yeah,
And I would say over the past 10 years, I'm like, it's really opened my eyes to like, oh, wait a second. So it's just, it's very odd to me. So like, think about it this way. When you get married and you become a father, people around you are like, best time, don't worry, you'll figure it out, best time of your whole life, right? And then if you have any problems, or if things aren't, just keeping up with the Joneses or the highlight reel of your friends on social media, well then you're broken, you're weak, you're less than, right? So you
mm,
don't even have like this necessarily, you don't have a perception of an authentic space or a relationship where you can even open up about this stuff, like, right? Dude, there are so many people, like, get this, okay? um if you look at the graduation rates of college students, which I don't even know what that is anymore. But let's just say, for the simple fact that graduation rate is like, I think the last thing I heard was like in the 40 percentile. I don't know. I could be wrong. Like there's the optimist in me thought it was way higher than that, but let's just round it up to 50%. Let's just say one
yeah,
out of two people graduate college. Well, one out of two couples get divorced. And we know that. We know that the divorce rate's 50%. But here's where I think is the biggest absolute miss. And I think a lot of it has to do with this perception that we need to do this all on our own. We need to never reach out for help. And if we do reach out for help, like, we're wrong, we're broken, something's wrong. I remember growing up, I'm 49. I remember growing up, and if your friend's parents or your parents were in therapy, oh my God. Like, and that got out, oh my God, you were just made fun of. You were a broken family. You guys were just doomed. Like, it was the stereotype and the shame that people felt like for getting
mm,
help was
yeah,
insane. So like, when it comes to that, like, there's this perception and almost shame around, like, well, if I don't know how to optimize the communication with my wife, if I don't know how to build intimacy, if I don't know how to have conversational excellence with my wife, then something's wrong with me. If
yeah,
I don't know how to be patient with my kids, connect with my kids, and do this whole father thing flawlessly, well, I suck. Man, stop buying into that story. It is so misleading. It is so wrong, because anything that we do well, anything, martial arts, career, fishing, flying a kite, there's a certain that you have to go about camping. You have to learn how to camp. Like, you shouldn't just go out there and wing it if you don't know how to camp. If you don't know how to, like, start a fire, things like that. All these things, if you want to hunt, if you want to fish, if you want to do all these different skills, you got to learn how to do it. Someone's got to teach you, or you got to be self-taught. But there's skills to learn. The same true for marriage. So let me go back to what I was talking about with the statistics. We all know the divorce rate's 50%. The thing that we don't talk about there. So here's some crazy stats for you. Only 3% of marriages, three couples out of every 100 that stay together can actually identify their relationship as I'm over the moon for this person.
Mm,
This is the best thing ever. I wouldn't change a thing. It's awesome. There's another 12% camp of it's pretty good.
mm,
It's not all sunshine and rainbows. Got to settle for some things like not necessarily over the moon for this person, but man, I love her a lot. She loves me. We have a good time. Like things are good. The rest of the 85% that stay together, they're in some sort of situation where they're resentful.
mm,
They're settled. They're fighting. They're disconnected. They're not emotionally connected. They're not physically connected. In some 30% of all marriages, two people live completely separate lives.
mm.
They just live under the same roof. They don't even interact with each other. Those statistics point to we need more resources and we just need to learn more. And what I will tell you, learn more, there's a common denominator in that 3% couple. And even in the 12% couple, the 15% of couples that are pretty happy, those couples don't wing it.
Yeah.
If you really understand what those couples are doing, the elite, the successful, they grow together. They read books together. They listen to podcasts together. They go out on dates. They have conversations. They might have a coach in their life. They might have a therapist in their life. They don't go at it alone and they don't rely on like, I'll just, it's the feeling of in love. I either feel it or I don't. There is no compromise. There's no nothing in between. Like I just, whatever. They are so intentional, they are so purposeful, and they don't leave it to chance. And that is what I think is the biggest lie that we tell ourselves is we've got to just figure it out on our own. And it's
Absolutely.
crazy. I know you're a martial artist, and like if you think of, I love the movie Karate Kid,
Oh yeah.
and I love the part where Daniel LaRusso had just got his ass whooped, and he's in the apartment and he's got a book open and he's
Mm,
practicing front kicks, and Miyagi walks in to fix the faucet.
yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, karate." And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, and he looks at him kind of odd. He goes, "You're learning from a book?"
Mm,
And he's like, "Yeah, I can't really afford lessons."
yeah.
But it's interesting. Like, that's not real world. You need a teacher. You need someone to
Yeah.
spar with, right? And this is no different.
No, absolutely. I think one of the things where we're fortunate is that, like you said, there was this stigma about getting any kind of help with relationships or mental health. And to get a little broader, but then narrow back in, I figure culture is enlightened to the degree that how many human beings they consider people. Like American culture, when America started, women and minorities, black people, were not considered people. And over the course of our history, they decided black people were people. Then they decided women were people. Then they decided gay people were people. And I think we're right now in the time period when we're starting to consider the mentally ill people. And I think that's good for our society. And I think it is lucky that for folks like us, where we can go into marital therapy, we can be openly seen reading a book of coaching on how to communicate with our family. We can go to counseling without the kind of stigma and embarrassment that our parents face. And I think that's a good opportunity. We just need to allow ourselves to take it.
I would agree. In fact, I think it's a huge miss if you don't.
Yeah,
Like, I think I think you're leaving major cards on the table
yeah,
if you don't. Like, you're leaving a ton on the table. And
yeah. It is more fulfilling, like you said. But I think
yeah,
also, there's that one of those things that St. Rogers of the neighborhood said repeatedly, that love isn't a noun, it's a verb.
it's verb.
And verbs are skills. And if you approach it with intentionality and openness and a willingness to set your ego aside and accept that, hey, maybe I'm not the best person in the world at this who can't learn something from talking to somebody, then we're able to do that verb with more effectiveness for our wives, for our children, for our elders, for our pets, even. Well, Larry, I really appreciate you taking the time today. Before I let you go, one last question. What's the really smart question I should have asked you but didn't?
I mean, I could definitely talk about you can talk about anything marriage related, and I can also talk. I mean, I have four boys, so I'm really attuned to raising young men, and
Yeah,
I can answer any questions, any mistakes, any face plants I've made that people can learn from. Hey, do this, don't do that. But I can answer questions around that if you want to go more in depth, and if
that
you don't,
sounds.
that's okay.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. One of the things I think with young men, especially, and this is, I know some people don't like this opinion, but it's an opinion I have that over the last 4 or 5 years, there is this predatory teach you how to be a man industry and segment and movement in our society that young men can fall into very easily and is poisonous and is dangerous and is antithetical to almost everything we've talked about in this conversation. And yeah, so what you talked about a face plant you had with raising boys, and I think again that openness and that vulnerability and that willingness to say, "Hey, I screwed this up. This is what I'm going to do next time." Is a great way to lead by example. So what's an amusing and educational face plant you did raising your four boys, which is twice as many boys as I
Oh boy, let me. There's so many face plants, and there's
have.
just
Mm,
there's a lot of things that I have I've done wrong over the years. And what I can tell you is like, so here's what I'll tell you. When it comes to me raising my young men,
mm,
um, number one, I think one of the biggest mistakes I've made is like, well, I think I have to know how to do all this stuff, right? Like, I didn't grow up with a dad, and I don't know, I didn't know how to hunt. I only knew how to fish. I didn't know how to fix anything. Like I didn't really know a lot of these things of what it took to raise a young man. And here's what I've always told my kids. And I'm just very honest with them. I always tell the boys, I'm like, listen, as you know, I wasn't raised with a father. There's a lot of fatherly things I don't know how to do.
mm,
I'll teach you every single thing that I do know.
mm.
And if there's anything that you ever want to learn and I don't know how to do it, my promise to you is we will go learn together. And so like my 16-year-old came to me last year and he's like, I really want to go hunting. And I never gone hunting. I've
Mm,
fished, constantly growing up. I love to fish. And I've taught my boys how to fish. Hunting, I didn't know. And I told my son that I don't know how to hunt. I said, but I want to learn too. I was and even if I didn't want to learn, I would want to learn with you.
mm,
I was like, so let's go. I was like, I'll figure out a ranch that we can go to or whatever, where it's a guided hunting trip. We'll take the safety classes, we'll get our license and we'll go hunt. And we did. And it was awesome. Really great time. Um, so like I think having that perception of like, I think there's a lot of pressure on guys, and I used to have this pressure too, that I think a big mistake that we make is like, well, I have to know how to do it. And if I don't know how to do it, then I have to kind of like wing it and act like I know how to do it.
yeah,
You don't have to do that. In fact, I think one of the most beautiful lessons is like, dude, no, I don't know how to do this. Like, let's go learn. Never too old to learn. Um, when it comes to raising men, though, um, here's my view. If you are a man, it's really important that you are also a dangerous man,
mm,
a dangerously good man, right? A good man who can be dangerous if he needs to be. And all my boys know how to defend themselves. I know how to defend myself. I did martial arts for a long time. I just started jujitsu as well. It's my fourth martial art that I'm doing over the years, and I love it. And I've never had to actually use it,
yeah,
in a real scenario outside of high school. I also think you have to have a time, you have to have moments where you need to turn the savage on.
mm,
I think it's okay to be a savage. Like let the beast out. Like if you want to push yourself to excellence, whatever that is, whether it's on the football field, whether it's in the wrestling room, whether it's doing your homework,
mm,
like whether it's helping out a friend, or whether it's like you just don't feel like doing something, you need to let that beast out and be a savage about it,
yeah,
right? I also think when it comes to friendships and connections and girlfriends, you've got to be an empathetic,
mm,
compassionate, unbelievably good listener. I teach my boys that. The other thing too is here's where I think a lot of us miss out on one big thing. There's a huge miss in people not knowing what the hell to do in marriage. So here's what I'll tell you. My responsibility for these young men is I am going to teach you how to love a woman, how to
mm,
appreciate her, how to pursue her, how to communicate with her, how to have conflict resolution with her, how to make like I know my wife for 28 years. I have been married to her for 21 years. My boys will tell you, you guys gross me out. I'm like, good. My goal is to go gross you out at least once a day. That's my goal,
Yeah.
right? Because I want you to, and but they'll also tell you, oh my God, it's amazing. Like I love the fact that you guys love each other so much. So, and my wife, here's the other thing too. My boys are going to learn how to treat a woman by how I treat their mom. But
Yeah.
here's the other thing too. My wife, if you ask her, be like, why do you go about marriage the way you do? And my wife will be like, well, I love my husband, but I also want to show these boys this is how you treat a man. This is how you support a man. This is how you acknowledge and respect a man. This is how you love a man. This is how you serve a man. And I'm not saying like she's less than, like
Yeah.
she is a savage queen, right? And the way she goes about this is like, I'm going to show you how you should be treated because you're going to have these knucklehead drama queen girls come into your life and you're not going to have a standard to compare that to.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, man. Like and I'll share this last little bit. I had a conversation. My oldest son now has a girlfriend. He's had a girlfriend for the past 3 months. He's dated girls here and there, but it's never really been a huge interest for him. Like he wrestles, he's in band, like he's friends, all that stuff. And I'm like, Ethan, what's up with the girls, man? What's up with the girls? Like, right? Like, what's going on with the girls? He's like, and he'll just look at me. He'll be like, yeah, Dad, there's not a whole lot of them. I was like, dude, there's 1,600 people at your school. Like, there's lots of girls. He's like, he goes, there's a lot of hot ones, but they're problems. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I don't want like these dumb, like selfie, Snapchat drama queen. Like, I want a good woman. I want a good woman. And I just kind of like look at that and I'm like, well, why do you want a good woman? And they'll tell me, I want what you guys have. And they'll point to me and my wife. And I'm like, holy crap. Like there is the validation right there. We don't love each other that way just because we want that response, but it's so reassuring that that response is there, that that's
Yeah.
what they're measuring it against. And I'm like, man, that's good. You should, I wish I was as
Yeah.
smart as you were.
That's gotta really warm the heart on that senior boys learn that early.
Yeah.
And we joke that we did my oldest a disservice. He's 24 now. Uh, he had terrible luck with women in high school because kind of like what you're saying, he grew up with the model of a man being with a woman, and in high school the only people available to date are girls. And now that he's in his twenties, he's starting to meet people with the maturity that he's come to expect. And although it was a little rough for him when he was 17, I'm really glad that he came into young adulthood with those standards.
And how old are you? How old you have two boys, right?
Two boys, 24 and 14. I joke, but it's not really a joke that we raised only children serially, and it's kind of
S-
interesting because their relationship is more. It feels much more like an uncle cousin vibe.
An uncle cut like yeah, because it's like they're like they're a decade apart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the oldest was in fact adopted when he was 8.
Okay.
He's a shirt tail relative whose father wasn't in the picture, and his mother became medically incapable of caring for him,
Got
and so he came to stay with us. And then the youngest one is homegrown, as it were.
it. Okay. Homegrown. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. I call them my domestic and my import. Um,
Okay. That's good. That's good.
yeah, I'll occasionally also refer to the older one, as the rough draft, because we joke. One of the
Rough
things
draft.
I feel bad about as a parent was I started my safest family on the block journey after my oldest was grown. I was 18 and out of the house, and I've learned so much about parenting, and I can see all the mistakes I made with the oldest one that I'm not making with the youngest one. And so he and I found a way to joke about it and find it and not have him be resentful because humor is our love language. But we again, that's to that willingness to learn and grow in public. I think is the best way that we can recover from our mistakes with our kids. Thank you again for coming on the show, and for the 3 or 4 people who aren't sure, could you tell folks where to find you and what you can do for folks?
You can find everything I'm doing over at thedadedge.com. Instagram is the Dad Edge, Facebook, the Dad Edge. Got lots of free resources for you. If you go to our website and go to the nav bar on the resources tab, got lots of free resources for you for marriage, for parenting, for connection, all those different things. If podcast is a great spot to start. And if you want group coaching, we got two different programs, one for 9 to 5 career guys and one for business owners called the Boardroom. So that's what we got. That's the best way to connect.
Outstanding. Well, thank you very much, sir, for coming on today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next week. Till then, stay safe.